Oh, you're muted.
Crushing it already. Week
18.
Week 18, Juju, man. OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. We made it. This is the last dance of the 2024 season here on Searching for Ceiling. So thank you for tuning in all season. Thank you for joining us in week 18. And what an interesting slate it is. Without further ado, you see him every single week. We'll bring him in. Mr. Rich Hribar, how we doing, dude?
We're doing good. Happy New Year to everybody. And as we bring in the new year, we close down the 2024 NFL season. It feels fitting. But
Yes.
we made it, man. It's been a fun ride. I enjoyed the 2 years we've done this show together. It's been a lot of fun. It's made me a better player. Hopefully, it's made some other people better players as well. And here it is, man. Year 2, put in the books.
100%, dude. And we've had some sweats this year, dude. I mean, I capped off the season last week with another sweat in the main event, Mega Milli, whatever the hell, $3,333. Yeah, that big one. And I was sweating from the emergency room, actually.
Oh no.
Yeah, I had like a bad allergic reaction to, I think, Pepto-Bismol. I hadn't taken it in decades. And I like had a stomach ache when I was working NBC games on Saturday. I was like, "Hun, you got to get me like something for my stomach." She comes home, I take it, and like my face just swelled up.
Oh,
so man. That was fun. But yeah, dude, we had so many close calls. You and I and the community from this show. You and I did not bink anything major, but man, it has been a successful season as far as putting ourselves in position, having shots on goal. So I'm excited to end it out here. Things are not finalized just like last year, but I would with a high degree of certainty say that we are going to be running this back next year. Sneak peek. The playoff slates are just not big enough for us to be doing this in like what we try to provide in the show. If you are still looking for stuff, Rich is still going to be writing and doing all his things over at Sharp Football Analysis. Head on over there, use code TAKE25, get 25% off anything on their site, including all of Rich's great work. And 1 week season, we will still have all of our standard offerings throughout the playoffs through the Super Bowl. So if you've been dabbling, if you've been hesitant to check out what we've got going on behind the scenes, I urge you to give us a try. You're probably going to get some discounts. You'll see them on the home site. So that's that. Thank you again for everyone for tuning in this season. We'll be back next year. I can all but assure you. With that, dude, let's talk week 18, shall we?
It is a week of all weeks.
Yes, the week to rule them all. The 1 week to rule them all. We've got 2 games on Saturday. And that leaves us with a rather hefty 14-game slate for week 18. But at the same time, like this is the slate of uncertainty. Like we have no idea how these teams are going to be prepared, how they're going to react in game, how they're planning to manage their personnel. But what we know is all teams have a level playing field. They're only allowed so many inactives. They're only allowed so many practice squad call-ups. So that's going to kind of handcuff them a little bit as far as what they want to do here. But looking at this slate, man, what kind of jumps off to you from the top before we even like talk about any of these games?
I mean, I can say definitely the decade plus I've been doing this. This is the worst collection of quarterbacks I've ever seen start a week in the NFL since I've been covering the NFL over a decade, man. Plus. I mean, we'll remove Josh Allen because he's probably going to start to extend his streak, but we're going to see Trubisky. We've already got Bailey Zappi. We're still probably going to get another week of whatever New Orleans puts on the field. Carson Wentz and Jimmy Garoppolo are coming out of the grave to start. Tanner McKee might start a game. We know we're going to have Drew Lock and Tyler Huntley. We still have Aiden O'Connell starting. Mac Jones is still starting. Joe Flacco is going to start. Josh Dobbs is going to start. Like this is just the collection of quarterbacks that are going to be playing this week is absolutely crazy. And the interesting thing is when you talk about all these like quarterback vagabonds, people are going to play some of them.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know if you have a favorite from that group or does anyone tickle your fancy from that group?
I think I want to go just above that group. I think the lowest that I really am interested in earnest this week is probably Bryce Young at 5,800. below that, dude, it just feels like you're grasping at straws. It really does. I mean, we can talk about Geno potentially with the Rams.
Yeah.
Rest players with his, I mean, he has a very, very incentive laden contract. I mean, he's playing for about 3 million, 3 different
And it's
areas.
correlated with 2 receivers that have incentives. You know, JSN's going for the franchise reception record. DK is like 60 and change short of 1,000 yards. They said they want to get him. So it's like you have the
Yeah.
little Seattle correlation.
Yeah.
And
Just
Mike
pre-built for
McDonald,
you.
yeah, Mike McDonald in his first season has a shot to end. They can't make the playoffs. It ends on a sour note, but they have a shot to end the season with 10 wins in his first year.
Yeah.
I think that they're definitely going to push.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I mean is like there's a lot of uncertainty here. Like even D'Amico Ryans came out and said like our guys need to be ready to go this week, something to that effect. And it's like, really? You're
Yeah.
really like I don't
Our
believe you.
quarterback's taking the most sacks of any quarterback that's not Caleb Williams, so we're going to trot him out there for the
Yeah.
entirety of this game that doesn't affect seeding whatsoever.
Yeah, we've had 2/3 of our wide receiver core go down to season-ending injuries. We're gonna run Nico for sure. Totally, gotcha. So yeah, that's what we have to weed through this week. That's what we have to work with. So you're going to see a lot of people focusing on incentives. You're going to see a lot of people focusing on like what do these teams have to play for? And while I think that is a must this week, I do get the feeling that the field is going to overemphasize a lot of this stuff.
No way.
Right? Yeah, shocker. It
The
happens
fantasy
every
community would
year,
never overweight anything narrative driven.
right? So that provides just another kind of, if we look at like the game of DFS as just this string of decision points where we have to make a decision at each position, we have to make a decision on contest selection, all these things, that kind of just adds another decision point in our decision making matrix. Speaking like theoretically real quick, it's not that we have to weight anything more than anything else. It's just simply another checkpoint where we have to reassess and make decisions. So shifting the mindset a little bit to why that's so important this week, it kind of becomes not who's playing for incentives or who has this to play for or what are they playing for. It becomes this is now decision point number 12 in our string of decisions that we're making this week. And that kind of that just changing our framework and thinking it or viewing this slate through that lens, I think is already going to be a massive boost to expected value this week.
Yeah,
Anything
I
else to
like
add
that.
on like the macro stuff, dude?
No, I think that's solid. I mean, my week 18 approach, I mean, in context this season is one, my style of play is I like to play small field. I like the onslaught games and onslaught teams. And I think that this slate in particular allows me the advantage to do that and not get cute. One mistake I say that most often I see people make on slates like this is they try to account for too many things happening.
Yes.
And that is the biggest mistake gamers make. You can't account for everything in a regular week where we have a lot of information. So when you have weeks like this and you just try to account for too many things in the air, that's almost something that's always going to hurt you always.
For sure. And I mean, that goes for any slate, but it is kind of
Yeah.
magnified this week for
Well,
sure.
especially this because like people are like, oh, dude, I want to get Blake Corman. Do you want to get Ray Davison? Do you want to get Will Shipley in? Like, what if these guys smash at this price and I miss out? Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to get them all.
Yes. We're not playing Pokemon here. We don't have to catch them all. So with this idea that like the uncertainty of like what these teams are playing for, what are the incentives, like what's going on personnel wise, we can only have 6 inactives, like all this stuff coming in to play here. One of the games that kind of stands out to me the most is between 2 teams that have absolutely nothing to play
Mhm.
for. And that's the Jaguars and the Colts, man. Did you get a chance to watch the tape from the Giants Colts game last week?
I mean, I watched the game off and I haven't gone back and like rewatched it, but I mean, just what a deplorable
Oh my
effort.
God.
The second touchdown that Neighbor scored was the most ludicrous defense I've ever seen. Like,
Unbelievable. All 4 of his touchdowns were just like, what? Like, okay, he had the 5-yarder in there to Wan'Dale Robinson. And we're speaking to Drew Lock here. He had the 5-yarder in there to Wan'Dale Robinson, but like 2 plays before that was a severely underthrown ball to the right sideline, which Malik Neighbors shed his defender, who never turned around and caught like a 40-yard pass to get them into the red zone. And then the first touchdown to Malik Neighbors was a screen on 3rd and 18 that he housed from 30 out. The second score was like a slant to Darius Slayton. The third score was that short one to Wandale. The fourth score was an out in double coverage to Malik Neighbors. He sheds between the defenders and then outruns everyone down the sideline for 60. Like, what? Dude, the run, I was tilting. I didn't watch that game on Sunday because I was fucking in the ER. Like, I went back and watched it, and I was like, dude, the run out, are you serious?
I knew, like, in the second quarter, I remember talking to my son. I was like, man, someone's going to win $1 million off Drew Lock this week.
Unreal, dude.
And they did.
Unreal.
Good for that.
It's like, I nailed it, man. I was all over a Tampa mega stack. I was sitting pretty. I was in like 70th in the mega milli, which was like 20K or like 20K, and obviously 2 million up top. I was like, dude, I got a shot here. And then that Giants and the Colts of all teams goes off. I was like, I'm dead. Oh my God. But dude, that was anyway, all of that, like, to say this Colts defense is probably the worst defense in the league. I would not be surprised if Gus Bradley is one of the first names that is fired once this game ends. That's bad. Like, it was so bad last week. So now we have the Jaguars coming to town. And the Jaguars are a very interesting team. They can't really run the football effectively. And their pass game, since Mac Jones took over with all the injuries, so after Evan Ingram got injured, after Gabe Davis got injured, after Christian Kirk got injured, is literally just Brian Thomas Jr. So this is a very interesting setup for me where, like, the field is probably all in Mike Evans because he's chasing history. He has all these contract incentives. He needs 2 touchdowns for another bonus. In addition to 5 catches, I think it's 5 or 6 catches. And
5 for 85.
5 for 85 with 2 touchdowns would get him like the maximum. Would check all of his, like, what he's playing for, bonuses and like history. So in that, like, just under Mike Evans is sitting here, Brian Thomas Jr., who's really, really interesting to me. I mean, I could rattle off his stats since Mac Jones has been the starter with all the injuries, but it's like top 3 wide receiver across the board effectively. So are you interested in this game? Do you think the Colts with Flacco under center can push back? How are you seeing this spot?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this game has like the volatility of the 2 teams that don't have anything to play for, but we saw these teams back in week 5 when Flacco's, I believe, was his first official start. They scored 71 points in the rain in Jacksonville. There was like a wild fourth quarter run out. Trevor Lawrence did start in that game. It wasn't Mac Jones, but again, we just saw the Colts off 45 points to Drew Lock. So we're not going to put it out of the realm of the possibility that Mac Jones can find at least some level of success here. Maybe not 45 points worth, but the Jaguars are 30th in success rate against defending the pass. The Colts are 25th. Like, there's an opportunity here for good run out. And you have basically the clear peak high price play of Brian Thomas Jr., who, like you said, I mean, what we love about what they did with Brian Thomas Jr. at the end of the season, it's not that just like he's getting just spoon-fed a bunch of targets. It's that they've like built the whole offense around him. He's like playing in the slot 30% of the time. They're giving him screen targets. Like, he scored a touchdown on the slot fade last week. He, over the past 5 weeks where he has double-digit targets in every game, we also love that when they get anywhere close to scoring, they just try to dial up stuff for him. I mean, he has 44% of the team's red zone targets over that span, and 63% of their end zone targets. So basically 2 of every 3 throws Mac Jones has thrown into the end zone have gone to Brian Thomas Jr. So you have him as like the clear piece. And then I think you have the Flacco run back stuff that is interesting. If you want to do a mini, you could do something with Jonathan Taylor, but then you have like the Flacco stack stuff where Flacco plus Downs plus Pittman or Pierce, your flavor of those 2 or those 3 guys, allows you like a really cheap double that, man, like you can absolutely like hit on those guys. There's a couple of those in place this week, but definitely that one stands out the most. And we saw last week, where the field went to Downs again, Pittman, every touchdown pass Pittman's caught this season has come from Flacco. So
it's not a lot of them, but
it's not many of them. They've all been from Flacco.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, like, what do you make of that situation? Up until last week, Flacco had 4 starts. Josh Downs had seen 9 or more targets in all 4 of them and had been the clear, like, top option for Flacco. And then he comes out and he plays only 61% of the offensive snaps in a standard slot role, which we expect.
Yep.
But we saw, I mean, from the jump, it was pretty much Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman in that game. What do you make of that, like, target pecking order with Flacco under center now?
Yeah, and that's the risk you always run with the slot only guy, right? If Jonathan Taylor's running the football effectively, which people should have assumed was going to happen with the New York Giants being involved. And there was some game script stuff where it's like, well, we should have got more 11 personnel if they were chasing that many points, and they had to throw heavily in the fourth quarter of that game. But when you do go all in on a slot receiver, you are at the mercy of, like, what if this team just doesn't play a lot of 11 personnel this week? We've seen it with Jaden Reed a few times this season. So that's what you run. From just a being on the field stance, Pierce and Pittman are going to be on the field more than Josh Downs. You inherently know that.
Yeah. I prefer, and this is like not splitting hairs, but like this is where the data is taking us slightly. I think my favorite stacking partner with Flacco, if you're running a Flacco, is Alec Pierce. Downfield role, he actually saw some of those like fantasy smoothing targets that you talk about all the time last week. It wasn't only deep stuff. He was running more slants. He was running more ins. He was running a little bit more of these higher per target confidence routes. And it was kind of like from the jump, like Flacco was kind of locking in onto him, dude.
Yeah, 9 targets last week.
Yeah. And Pittman is probably my least favorite still. Last week was the first
He's just not
week.
fun.
He's just not fun at all. But like last week was the first week he's seen double-digit targets all season. Only the second time he's gone over 100 yards was his third touchdown, like we talked about. He's not been very red zone heavy, red zone centric in this offense. And then like, man, he's just like I don't think he's still all the way healthy. Been dealing with this back stuff. He just does not look. He just looks kind of like pretty statuesque out there on the field. So are you most interested in like a Pierce Downs? Are you most like I'm trying to figure out like where my head's at with this if I'm running
I like
Flacco.
Pierce the most individuals, but I will say I will probably openly make a lineup with both iterations where it's Downs Pierce and Pittman Pierce.
Yeah.
I probably will play both.
Okay.
And just see which one wins out. But I'll probably play them in similar like shadow tournaments, like especially if you're on DraftKings, like you might have I'm trying to think of what they call it. I don't know if it's not one of the Hail Marys or whatever, but then it goes from 4,500 entrants like down to 1,250, and then there's one at like 650. And I'll probably play like one in the 650 and one in the 1,250, like something like that. And then just kind of see let the deities take the wheel. But I'll try to cover both of it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I love Brian Thomas Jr. and I don't know where I stand on Flacco, to be honest, at this point.
I think I'm only playing it from that angle of the small field single entry, like get this game works out this way, and that's it. That's the only way. Like, I'm not interested in playing it in large field. I'm not interested in, because I do think we'll still see Brian Thomas Jr. based on from a DraftKings perspective, draw enough ownership because of the way the high priced receivers are this week. Puka's probably not going to play. Evans will be popular for a number of reasons. Nico Collins won't be played because we don't know how much he'll play. AJ Brown probably won't play. And then you've got Neighbors and Brian Thomas right above 7K. And so I think just by default, he'll get some interest. And he's just been so good. Like Chase Brown. I compared him to Chase Brown like a couple weeks ago, right? Like where his pricing was just like, we knew it was going to keep being like this, but you kept playing him because it was so underpriced.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else to add from this spot, dude?
No, I will say, like, if you're looking at just like the Jaguars, who we know have been volatile with the man coverage and cover two, like they kind of oscillate. Like, do we play a lot of cover two this week, or do we play a lot of man coverage? Those things definitely favor Downs. Like, he's been a great man beater while he's been in the NFL. You just need the snaps, and then you would think his slot role also would be conducive to the cover two stuff if no matter what they try to deploy. So
yeah, that's a good shout. I like that. Another game where it has two teams that we should see maximum effort from. And again, that's different than like incentive stuff because the incentive is personal. How the team is going to approach the game is like team top down. And that we're talking about the Panthers and the Falcons. Obviously, we know the Falcons need a win. They need a Buccaneers loss to get in the postseason. And this Panthers team is kind of at the tail end of like their trial period. Like the Dave Canales' first year here, they've changed a bunch of stuff throughout the season. They're playing a little bit better football now down the stretch. So I see them as using this as like, this is going to help us into the off season, into our decision-making process there. What do we have that we like? What do we need to be changing here? So I think both of these teams are probably going to give it a good go here. With that, though, we talked last week. I can't remember if it was here or if it was on the Slate podcast. It might have been the Slate. But we talked about how the Panthers are experiencing more offensive success. I think we covered it here. Sorry. We talked about how the Panthers are achieving more offensive success because they are being more balanced on offense and they've been more successful with the run game. We talked about last week how the absence of Chuba Hubbard could affect that and influence them. And we kind of saw that. Like they played pretty well in the first half. Adam Thielen had the 2 first half touchdowns. But after that, they kind of really fell on their sword with really no ability to run the football. I mean, they're trotting out Raheem Blackshear at like 80% of the offensive snaps. That's where we're at with Carolina. So all of that together, we have like this matchup against the Falcons that is more pass funnel than it is run funnel, more neutral, I would say. How do you see the Panthers approaching this? And do you have any interest from their side?
Yeah, I think this game initially popped for me of like, do I want to go all in on it? And then the thing that pulls me back is that I just think that Bijan Robinson's going to run for so many yards in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time these teams played, Kirk Cousins was a starter, and the Falcons running backs had 37 touches. And that's kind of, and because Michael Penix in his first start, he's had 2 starts, and they've been polar opposite game environments. His first start at home as a favorite against a New York Giants team that can't stop the run, you could insulate him. And they had a 48% drop back rate in that game. I feel like that is what we're setting up for a very similar type of game environment here. Instead of going on the road against a potential playoff team, against a good, defensive head coach and Dan Quinn. Like, I just don't think all that lines up this week where we're going to get the Michael Penix like run out. I really just think it's going to be a lot of Bijan Robinson in this game. And that's my one concern that I have. And then like you, I still have concerns about the Carolina side. They're going to, Miles Sanders is supposed to play, but how much will he play coming off of an ankle injury where he's basically missed 8 weeks? So it's just really hard. It's really just down to like Adam Thielen, like how much can he carry? And I just don't know how much he can carry in this particular matchup. It's not even like last week we were in on Thielen and our bringbacks with the Bucks. I don't know how much we're into Thielen this week because Thielen has extremely weaker splits against zone coverage than man coverage. Which Atlanta is 5th in the NFL and playing a lot of man coverage. Obviously, it's Raheem Morris. This is his bread and butter. And then they also have a lot of league low 6 yards per target to slot receivers, where Thielen plays 78% of his snaps. So I just don't know if we're going to be getting the 2 touchdown Thielen game that we got last week. There's just not a lot of signal here. The more I dove into this game, the more I just came out saying, just play Bijan Robinson.
Dude, I was the same, and that's really weird that we both kind of had that same journey with this game this week. I do a Tuesday roster build show for OWS at like Tuesday, which is like the first time I'm looking at the slate. A lot of weeks I'm literally looking at the slate for the first time on the show. And I wanted to gravitate towards this game, and I ended up building a game stack from this game. I wrote up this game on yesterday, and then over like processing it overnight, I was like, man, I don't think this is the spot I ever initially thought it to be. Yeah, very interesting. We both kind of did that same thing. I mean, look at Bryce Young too. 28 pass attempts, 26, 28, 34 the last month. They very clearly want to be a more run balanced team. And if they're not able to establish that, it really affects how this offense can operate. We also have Thielen, who's the short, he's slot guy, short ADOT. He needs volume. He got there on a very, very nice run out last week on only 6 targets, catching 5 for over 102. But without the volume, man, I'm pretty soured as well. Do you have any interest in any of the Atlanta pass catchers? Because we have an offense that is now at least capable of attacking downfield. Both Drake London and Darnell Mooney's ADOT has increased in the 2 games with Michael Penix under center. Michael Penix has a league slightly below league average, like 11.5 deep throw rate. And when you were looking at Kirk Cousins, man, he was like in the 9 point something range, which was 43rd of quarterbacks to start more than 2 games this season. So he was just like unable to throw deep. So any interest in Drake London, who has like 42% air yard share and 33% targets per out run and all these like good underlying metrics?
I don't have pushback if anyone gets there on him. I think from where I am now on Friday, I think he just gets squeezed out from like my cutoff. But I don't really have. If anyone is playing Penix stacks, I don't have like a real lot of pushback. If like you're in on that Carolina side, especially playing it from like the if Penix runs out, then that means Bijan also doesn't run out. We've seen the changes though. The changes that we've seen, it's only a 2-week sample that from this offense because Kirk Cousins, based on his lack of mobility, they were stuck. They had the lowest rate of play action. They had the lowest rate of throws, from outside of the pocket. And they were the bottom 10 team in throws outside the numbers. And all those things have, in only a 2-week sample, shifted where they've bumped up with the play action. They're getting more things, more pockets moving. And then the outside the numbers stuff has been extremely skewed towards Michael Penix throwing outside the numbers because his arm is just so much stronger. Almost a thing like Michael Penix has a little bit of the Kaepernick gene where every throw is the same velocity. We can just get a little air
zipping it in there.
Yeah. And for what could have been like a nice touchdown, and you just didn't put enough air on it. Let Bijan get under it.
Even that late touchdown to Michael to who the hell?
He can wing it though to Kyle Pitts.
To Kyle Pitts, that's right. So Michael Pittman. The last touchdown to Kyle Pitts. He freaking zipped that thing in there.
He's got a beamer, man. Like it's
no way he's catching.
Because you've seen the drops. They've actually had a significant number of drops these past 2 weeks because these dudes have been catching passes from Kirk Cousins all year. Yeah. It's like trying to catch Nolan Ryan after Indiati. Like, what are we doing?
R.A. Dickey throwing their knuckleball.
No one got that reference.
I had to bring it at least a few years younger. R.A. Dickey, man, his time is way gone. So I'm kind of with you, man. I think it's totally fine to just say like Bijan. And if you look at like the schematic matchup, it doesn't get much better for Bijan. Obviously we know that the Panthers are dead last or second to last in almost every rushing metric against the run, but they also are bleeding production on zone run blocking concepts and outside zone. 80% of Bijan's carries are coming from those zone concepts. So it is a very, very nice setup here. And early in the season, when the Falcons were able to play with a lead, control the game environment, they were working in Tyler Algier. That has not changed. Tyler Algier is still probably going to see 9 to 12 carries here. But what has changed is this team is so much more run focused over the second half of the season that it hasn't affected Bijan's like carries and touch totals. I mean, he has 22 or more opportunities in all but one of the last 6 games. The floor is just that much better because early in the season, it was like the team is going to get 30 carries. And if Tyler Algier is seeing 9 to 12 of those, that doesn't leave enough left over for Bijan. That's a little bit different now with the team. I mean, they could see 40 carries in this game. And if Tyler Algier is seeing that 12, that still leaves enough upside here for Bijan. So this is probably the most interested in Bijan I have been all season because I have not been a Bijan player in DFS. Look at he's priced, just for real quick shits and gigs here, Bijan is priced $100 less than Saquon Barkley. And we know Saquon's not going to play, but if this were week 17 and Bijan were $100 less than Saquon Barkley, Saquon's gone 29.7 or more fantasy points 6 times this season. Bijan has hit over 30 once. So he is not this, you're paying for massive floor with Bijan. So this is probably the most interested I have been all season in Bijan Robinson. And this is just must-win game, nuts matchup. They probably just running Bijan. So I can get behind that.
Yeah, in context of the slate, everything is kind of altered,
Yeah.
right? It's really him and Bucky Irving on DraftKings, and if you play on FanDuel, you get Jahmyr Gibbs in that player pool.
Yeah. And also, like, the context of the slate, elaborating on that a little bit, it's like 30 plus fantasy point scores are probably going to be rather thin, are probably going to not be as prevalent as a
Yeah,
normal
that was
slate.
my take too.
Yeah. So getting those, regardless of how much you're paying for it, is probably a little bit more important this week. Theory, shoving it down your throat. You mentioned Bucky Irving, dude. Do you want to talk about the Buccaneers real quick?
Yeah, I mean, Bucks are in a real good spot here at home. Massive favorites, big team total, must-win game. And what you like about the Bucks is they keep the throttle on. I mean, this is a team that scores a lot of points. I mean, they're second in the NFL in amount of games with 20 or 4 more points scored. So 3 touchdowns plus, right? Like it's pretty bankable that we're going to get 3 Tampa Bay touchdowns, if not more, in this game. And that allows us to kind of play all the Buccaneers if you want. I mean, particularly on this slate, it's not hard to do something like Baker, Evans, McMillan, and Bucky all together again, which has kind of been the go-to since the bye. Because Baker leads the NFL in yards per pass attempt since the bye. Also, since the bye, anytime we've seen Bucky Irving be remotely healthy, and that's always a question mark with him at this point, but we've seen him get 18, 28, 17, 19, 24 touches, opportunities in those games where he's healthy. His past 3 games without any real restrictions, he's had just under 70% of the backfield opportunities. And then on the cherry on top of it all is you're getting another great matchup. I mean, when we did this game earlier in the year, it was the first Bucky Irving game. This was the first game Rachaad White missed, and it ended up being a Sean Tucker game. But the Buccaneers backfield had 300 total yards and 3 touchdowns. The one thing kind of lost in the sauce with the Buccaneers this year and the job Liam Cohen's done is how good this backfield's been all year. And they've been good against in like tough matchups. Like they were good against the Ravens. They were good against the Chiefs. They were good against the 49ers. Like this backfield's been productive wire to wire all season. And then running backs have also scored as an extra cherry on top. 51.5% of the touchdowns against the Saints, the highest rate in the league. So it's pretty easy to know what to do here.
You mentioned Liam Cohen and the exploits of this backfield. This is fantasy's highest scoring backfield. If you combine the production of the top, even 2, if you even want to leave Sean Tucker out with that blow up game that he had, just using Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, this is fantasy's most valuable backfield. So is it a case where Rachaad White kind of, after almost fumbling the season away, is this a case where he's utilized a lot less and we see a little bit more emphasis on Bucky? Potentially. Rachaad White has seen snap rates of 51%, 50, 36% over the last 3 weeks, and that has left a little bit more meat on the bone here for Bucky Irving. 57%, 55% over the last 2 weeks. So I don't, and we have to also consider, like, Sean Tucker got 15 offensive snaps last week, but it was a blowout win. So does that kind of transpire again with Bucky Irving banged up? If this team is up big, do they kind of just take it easy on him? I think that's a viable outcome here as well. But if they're up big, chances are it's probably flowing through Bucky Irving as well. I like Bucky. Are you as goo goo gaga on Mike Evans this week as the field is going to be?
I mean, I'm definitely not down on Mike Evans at all. I mean, since he's come back, only Puka Nacua has more yards per route run than Mike Evans. He also has 5 touchdowns. Everyone's ad nauseum talked about the incentive stuff. It's a Saints game against not Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, right.
Which we don't have many of that. We don't get many of those. But the Saints also, since they've lost Lattimore and Paulson Adebo to that bad broken leg, I mean, they're 28th in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. They're 24th in yards per catch allowed to wide receivers if you're looking for big plays. They're also 30th in touchdown rate per target allowed to wide receiver ones this season. So it does all line up for Evans if they want to try to jam him in here to get him to these based on the matchup. I will say this, the Saints also know this though too.
Yeah.
So one thing to kind of be, Rizzy strikes me as one of those guys that'd be like a moral victory of like, stop
yeah.
Not
big
being...
F you, like, hire me, guys. Look what I did to Mike Evans.
Not on my watch, Mike.
Yeah, right.
But no, that's completely narrow. It all sets up, and then you have the McMillan stuff if, pending who's in and out of the lineup. But what I will say I like about McMillan in particular of this run he's on is that he's obviously not going to keep scoring touchdowns at this rate, but you like that they're designing plays for him to get touchdowns. Like these touchdowns that Jalen McMillan's scoring, these are plays designed for Jalen McMillan to score touchdowns. So Liam Cohen clearly has in mind of dialing up stuff for him. And those are things I like to latch on to, especially when these guys are on these like touchdown runs where we know it's not sustainable. And it's like, well, how are they scoring them? Right. And you look at like McMillan, like, he's getting stuff, like slot screens called for him, or pick plays called for him, and things like that. And that's the things like are pro, I think, to keep playing him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The caveat I'll add for the Buccaneers is this, even with Mike Evans like chasing history and all the things that, we've known this for the past 4 weeks. They're not just like feeding him targets. It is within the flow of the game. It is within their offensive game plan. Mike Evans has seen 9, 8, 11, 5 targets over the last 5 weeks. Jalen McMillan has not seen more than 7 in that same stretch. And these are 2 of those games were played without Cade Otton and Sterling Shepard. Is Cade Otton going to make it back this week? I don't know. I would guess that based on the opponent and where this team is at, that they would hold him out, particularly with him being a knee injury. But again, this is speculation. We don't really know. So I will just add the caveat that, like, yes, Evans has been hyper efficient. He always has been. This is a good matchup, but it's highly unlikely that he's going to come out and see 12 targets here, which might not matter, but it might. If he's not scoring multiple touchdowns, he very much can burn you at 8K if he's seeing 8, 9 targets. So just something to consider. I prefer Bucky Irving to Mike Evans straight up in a vacuum, based on the context of this slate. And this is a spot where, like, man, I'm really, really interested in 3 running back builds, and I'm really, really interested in 3 running back builds that do not include a cheapie.
Yes, that's exactly where I am. I feel like I want to pay up for the reason that you led with the Bijan Robinson stuff. I do believe that this is a slate where there's going to be fewer 30-plus point scoring games. So the guys that I think that have wealth in their range of outcomes that get you like 20-plus games are going to be significant. That maybe would be like prototypical, like more cash game plays. But on this particular slate, they might be also the upside guys, like the median plus ceiling in context of the slate. So I do want to prioritize, being able to play Bijan and Bucky Robinson, Bucky Irving, and then being able to play like Jahmyr Gibbs, on FanDuel, not really go into the super weeds. There are a couple running backs like I don't mind throwing some darts on, but I do think when it comes to paying up for running back or wide receiver, I want to pay for the running backs again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the meta of this season, but yeah.
It's the meta is metaing this week for sure. This is I
will say, unless you are on FanDuel where like you have the Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, like you have that game on the slate. That game changes the whole dynamic of the slate like so significantly.
Oh yeah. Yes. That is a playoff game, effectively. You have 0, you know what's going to happen in that game, and you know that both defenses are pass funnels. It's very good, very nice, very good spot. I like. All right. So those were the big 3 games that I wanted to make sure that we covered, as far as like games that I still think have a normal flow of an NFL game can happen in these 3 games that we talked about. Are there any others that you're kind of looking at as getting close to that, or that you think, could have some room for offensive production here?
I think those are definitely the standout games. I will say probably the one that I think gets played actually straight up too. Like we said, like we do believe Jags Indy gets played like, straight up, no like real goofy things happening. Like you might see a couple, snap shares for maybe it's a guy that was more banged up than like we didn't know about. But I do think the San Francisco-Arizona game has a little bit of intrigue, because I also believe that that's a game that's going to largely be played straight up. outside of maybe like a onesie, twosie, like guys that are maybe banged up. We got a couple, incentive narratives here. We also get the cheapie of Josh Dobbs. I think the difference between Josh Dobbs and the other quarterbacks that we rattled off at the opening show is we're getting a guy who can run at 4K. And that adds like a different wrinkle to it as well. Also, Josh Dobbs is very cheap stacking partners. He also is like, he could played a la carte because of the rushing. But then when you get into the realm of like, do you play him with the shower narrative of Juwan Jennings because they played together at Tennessee where, as a sophomore, Juwan Jennings had 7 touchdowns. We saw for one drive, Josh Dobbs came in on Monday night and he threw 75% of his passes at Juwan Jennings. Do we think that they're going to keep playing Ricky Pearsall more to end the season and see what he has versus a guy like Debo who's been nicked up and maybe is potentially in the outs of the organization this offseason? Because you're talking about Josh Dobbs plus Ricky Pearsall plus Juwan Jennings is 13.9K on DraftKings. Like that's a pretty insane. If you just remove even Pearsall, like those are cheaper. And then I do think Garendo is interesting as well as a counter to that. So I don't know. Does that game draw any interest to you? Because I do think that game's gonna be played face up too.
A little bit, yeah. I do think it does. Kyle Shanahan is a no nonsense type coach. I think that they have some upside. What do you make of George Kittle being banged up and Josh Dobbs' career touchdown target rate?
Yeah, I mean, the Kittle and Debo stuff, but both of them kind of practice this week, kind of be missing. It's like this would be a spot where it's like you don't run these guys out as much. We also know Jennings is, I think he's 73 yards short of 1,000. And Shanahan did mention like it's kind of the and anytime like that's a healthy number. It's not like he's 12 yards short of 1,000. Like 73 is still a pretty like sizable game, right? And I think that's I think that's ultimately what steered the Saquon decision too, is that like, yeah, 101 against the Giants is totally in the range of outcomes, but like 101 rushing yards is still 101 rushing yards. And the fact that you can't just play Saquon, you have to play like largely your whole offensive line with him.
And they're all mostly veterans and banged up. Yes.
I think that's what steered the thing. So like, I don't want you to hear like me say like, oh, they're going to try to get him 73 or 77 receiving yards or whatever it is and say like, that's a lock button. Like that still isn't free. But it does become a spot where like Jennings is still getting a lot of targets. And then, like I said, I think Garendo is just an outright pivot where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen in the San Francisco passing game with Dobbs playing, or if they maybe don't play Debo for a full game or they don't play Kittle for a full game. I do think that Garendo still is going to be a guy that gets a large run out. I mean, he's had 100% and 93% of the backfield touches his past 2 games. They really just don't have other dudes that they need to look at. Like, Kyle Shanahan has no interest in seeing what Patrick Taylor has to offer. Like, so I do think that Garendo still becomes an interesting play against the team that we have picked on with running back play over the course of the season. So I'm toying like when I'm trying to whittle my player pool down because of the reason we talked about. I'm trying not to be too scattershot this week. And Garendo is still like hanging right on the cusp of like, is he going to be in my running back pool?
Yeah. What do you, on the same vein, like, what do you make of the Cardinals, man? I mean, they're going to be trotting out Michael Carter in the backfield, played 72% of the offensive snaps last week. Kyler's got some incentives, but like, it's Kyler. I continue to refuse. Do you think the Cardinals give any pushback here, man?
Yeah, I think they're going to come out and play competitive football. We saw it on Saturday night. Like when everyone thought that they were dead and like oh, because that line shifted crazy where the Rams were, because I bet the Cardinals and I picked them on our show. I was like, dude, like this is just too many points for like I know the Cardinals are eliminated, but like they're going to show up in a division game. And they did. They played that game tough against the Rams. And that's what I believe they're going to do here. I think that's the same ilk Jonathan Gannon is too. The problem with the Cardinals from a DFS stance, though, is we know they're going to play hard. It's just that they have one dude that is consistently provided ceiling because we're not expecting James Conner, and it's Trey McBride. So you have one bring back here, and it's just Trey McBride.
Yeah, I think for that reason, I prefer Juwan Jennings as a one-off and not having to mess around with that stuff. But I think you can make a nice little mini correlation here. If you got the salary, because you're paying for McBride, we know this.
I'd say Dobbs is the only punt quarterback I'm mildly interested in. That's still like hanging into my player pool, and maybe he ends up being like he'll probably end up being cash game chalk, though, I guess.
Probably, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to necessarily be
because you can play Dobbs. And then you can probably automatically, if you play Dobbs, play Bijan, Bucky, and Evans, or Brian Thomas.
Yeah, I was just building a Dobbs, Juwan Jennings, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Brian Thomas, and Bucky Irving to see if I could do it. Just trying
You
to.
probably can.
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can. It's gonna get gross at tight end, but I think you can.
But I mean, this is another tight end slate where it's literally McBride and Bowers, and it's widely open after that again.
Yeah, which is the standard flavor of the season. What other games you got that you're looking at? We'll do one more game if we can fit it in, and then we'll go some cleanup stuff.
No, I'll let you if you got one. I don't really have like a game environment. Like those are the ones that, from an onslaught perspective, I wanted to attack.
Yeah.
And I will say too, if you're playing the Buccaneers stacks like the onslaughts again, I will say on this particular slate, Juwan Johnson actually looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, he has to just be on the field. They just don't have anybody else, man.
And we know where we want to attack the Bucs defensively. So I would say if you're not doing the Payne train again this week, Payne Durham or Devin Culp, that Juwan Johnson he fits nice and tidy in those Buccaneer onslaughts.
Yeah, I mean, after their Week 12 bye, dude, Juwan Johnson has played 70% of the offensive snaps or more in every game. So they just need him on the field, and they're running a ton of 12 because they have to. They have nobody else,
and they're going to be throwing. So
yeah, so I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. You mentioned your quarterback pool being rather thin. What are some other names on it? Let's talk about that. Let's shift gears here.
Yeah, I think definitely Jaden Daniels is maybe goes overlooked on the slate. Dan Quinn said that like them locking in that seed is of the utmost importance. You maybe have some stuff where we talk about the Buccaneers guys where they're in a position to maybe tap the brakes a little bit, but you'd have to think if they get there that Jaden Daniels has been a huge part of that. He is absolutely on fire. Just under 30 DraftKings points per game over his past 5. Touchdown regressions found him in a big way. 15 passing touchdowns, multiple scores in each game. You get the rushing stuff with him, and he's facing a team that just allowed 30 fantasy points to Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, what?
And then obviously, if you're on FanDuel, you can play the Sunday night game. But the other guy I have that we didn't name, because we talked about Baker too, it would just be some Denver stacks, Bo Nix plus Sutton plus Marvin Mims, because against these backups of the Chiefs, being on board. So like that's kind of it. It's like it's gonna be real tight.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, man. As far as tight ends go, I think this is going to be another position that is kind of a fulcrum of the slate, like a primary decision point of the slate. Are there any not necessarily backup dudes, but are there any guys that are priced below in this cheapy range that you're kind of circling as some salary saver potential?
I had you on, and then I think if you want to go way, way cheap, I mean, the only real standout would be like Peyton Hendershot. I don't think Noah Gray. 2 guys that are technically backups, but I don't think are going to play a lot are Kenneth Gainwell and Noah Gray.
Yeah.
Both of those guys are kind of involved in still the base operation of what these teams do. And I think that these teams are going to see what some of these, because the Chiefs picked up Peyton Hendershot before the season, and I think they're just going to give him run out. And I think same thing with Will Shipley. I think that you're going to see a lot of Will Shipley on Sunday, assuming he does finally clear protocol. He practiced yesterday.
Yeah. This is week 2 for him, right? In the protocol?
Yes. He didn't play last week.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think that both of those teams because I know people say, well, these guys are backups, they're going to play a lot, but I actually don't think either of those 2 quote unquote backups are going to play a lot.
Yeah, they're just, it's an interesting dynamic too, because how different is the Philadelphia Eagles backfield than the Buffalo Bills backfield? I would actually contend it's very different. We have a Bills backfield that there's only 3 names on it. They have Reggie Gilliam, who is the fullback, who's also on the roster, but there's only 3 names and they contribute on a weekly basis. So when you're only allowed so many inactives, it becomes this do we risk a veteran defensive lineman or an offensive lineman over a rookie running back? So I actually think that Ray Davis is going to see run. Where
because they have to burn a
they just
spot
have
at
to.
quarterback because of the Allen streak.
Exactly. Yeah.
They already brought up. I think today they signed Mike White because they can't have an emergency QB, right? They have to technically have the three. I don't know exactly the rules of the three
Ooh, I don't
QB
know.
stuff.
I don't
Because
know.
Josh Allen technically will not leave the game because of injury. I guess they
Because
could
of
make
injury.
something up. I guess they could just make something up and then whatever.
Questionable return with a left pinky.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how that would work out. That is interesting though. Yeah. So just the theme of this week is like not all these situations are the same. Not all of these situations are even close to the same. So like weeding through all of the noise is going to be immensely important. So I really like that Peyton Hendershot call.
I mean, the problem
Like,
with it is you're getting Peyton Hendershot playing with backups against the Denver defense that has everything to play for.
yeah,
But he's a punt. He is a punt.
and he's not going to get shadowed. No, I'm just kidding. We joke.
Yeah, it's
The
just
shadow
I
discussion.
mean, you definitely don't feel great about it, but if you are running like those Bo Nix stacks, maybe you get cute because they'll bring
Yeah,
you.
that's interesting. Let's move to wide receiver, dude. Are there any like really, really cheapies that you think see more run and actually are in a game environment that they could pop a little bit? Because I think this is probably one of the secondary, tertiary aspects of the slate is like there's probably going to be a dude down here at sub
There will be.
3,500 that puts up 25 fantasy points. So finding that guy is immensely valuable. So lay it on me, man. Do you see any guys down here that you're
I think it's
circling?
harder to do this versus the running backs because the running backs, like we can just play the opportunity game and just say if we get this opportunity, the running back can get there. Whereas the wide receivers, you could get opportunity, but yeah, it's still tied to like one of these backup quarterbacks. Like if you want to play Tyrell Shavers, you still have to hope Mitchell Trubisky can make Tyrell Shavers functional. If you're going to play John Dotson, you have to hope that Tanner McKee is jamming him with targets or whatever backup Chiefs wide receiver. You hope Carson Wentz can get him targets. Whereas I think there's enough cheap wide receivers on the slate, or at least like cheap enough where there's just not enough restrictions because we're not paying up at wide receiver outside of two guys. So if you want to play Jawan Jennings, I think he fits. If you want to play Marvin Mims again at 4,600, I think that he's totally viable. If you want to play Jalen McMillan again, where he's priced, are totally viable. And then, taking some shots at maybe at some of the running backs like a Ray Davis, a Blake Corum, and a Will Shipley maybe gets you there versus some of these other guys. I just don't think the context of the slate like dictates that I need to get the 3K receiver right. So
Okay.
we'll see what happens. But if you do get it right, I mean, you're gonna be in a good position. I just don't think. Do you have a guy that stands out to you, or you're like you are dialed in on?
Not really, man. We're talking like Jahan Dotson, like Johnny Wilson, Tyrell Shavers. Not really. That's why I asked. Like, I don't know if you.
I mean, would
saw
Pearsall fit
anything.
that for you? Like, do you think Pearsall they continue just to give him extra run to close us out?
I don't know.
And we talked about the Colts guys are all cheap too. Like they're not min
Yeah.
priced. They're not min priced, but they're not expensive either.
Yeah.
What about like Zacchaeus again? Like if you're playing Jaden Daniels.
Zacchaeus was interesting. We kind of poo-pooed on him last week, saying like, hey, realize that Olamide Zacchaeus's bump in volume kind of coincided with Terry McLaurin in two very, very difficult matchups. So I don't know
And
if
we now have this sample though with Washington over the back half of the year where Terry McLaurin has led the team in targets twice, I think, the past 8 games. Because before Noah Brown got hurt, he had out-targeted Terry McLaurin in like 4 of the previous 5 games. So like we have now this ongoing sample where like Terry McLaurin isn't just getting jammed with targets.
Yeah. I mean that's who he is. They don't need him to be that.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. Any like last out the door last shots of the 2024 season, man?
I mentioned a couple of gross guys that are at least I consider gross, but yeah, I mean that's kind of it. Is there any interest in like a Zach Charbonnet this week as a guy to mix in with all the Seattle receiver stuff because he's going to be running against backups too.
I think so. I think so. I think you can run him as a one-off, and I think he works well with a Geno double.
He was kind of the other guy. It's like just because I'm thinking about like how the field's going to be building lineups too. Like we always talk about that a lot, and I do think we're going to see Seattle doubles for sure.
Mm-hmm. Less likely to include Zach Charbonnet, but he'll be owned for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of just what it is. It's the week 18 slate, man. Here we are. What else you got for me? You got any weird ones?
I don't think so, man. I think we covered all the ones that I really wanted to jam about.
And I will say, if you're on FanDuel and you're ahead at after the afternoon games end, good luck.
Log out.
Good luck.
Don't look. Don't watch.
There's going to be a lot of PMR remaining.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of high upside PMR at that. Well, sweet, man. As always, thank you so much to Rich. Thank you so much to Sharp Football Analysis for lending you us for an hour every week. Thank you all to the listeners for tuning in every week. This show has been a blessing. It has been a blast. And hopefully we've learned some stuff along the way. Again, look for us next year, man. But that is going to do it. Last dance of 2024 season. Until next year, you all, I'm Hilow. He is Rich. We will see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 week season.